Hey, this is Jason and you're watching The Lawn Care Life. Today I ran into a homeowner who asked for my help. I was out spraying a neighbor's yard and he came over and he had done some damage to his lawn and he was wanting some advice. Well, as I began talking to him and as I talk to people on a regular basis, some people have a basic question, and it's the question of how do I kill the weeds in my lawn without killing the grass? You see, what this guy had done, he had bought some sort of weed control product, but he had severely damaged his grass in the process. So I'm going to give you some basic principles of weed control. I can show you some products, and let's see if we can talk about, weed control for your lawn. Stay tuned. Okay, so like I said, the guy comes over and he says, can you help me with my lawn? So I go over and I just want to, help him, whether that means have him as a customer or at least talk him through his situation. And I couldn't decide which one he wanted to do. He was sort of wanting a price, but then he was wanting some advice too. And so we did both. I gave him the advice and I said, if you want me to do it, I'd be happy to do it. If you don't want me to do it, here's what you need to do. But he had caused a lot of damage to his lawn. He had a centipede lawn and it was quite yellow and had a lot of bare spots in it. Let's get a few terms out of the way when we're talking about weed control in a general sense. So you might hear people, if you're a homeowner or maybe you're in the lawn business but you don't do weed control, and you hear people throw around terms and maybe you just don't quite understand what those terms mean. So they talk about weed control, they're talking about using pre-emergent herbicides and post-emergent herbicides. And it's some terminology that if you're not familiar with, you're like, well, what's the difference in those? Well, let me try to explain it in simple terms as I can. A pre-emergent, and this is how I explain to people, a pre-emergent, basically the general concept is you're trying to prevent weeds, okay? Forming a barrier on the ground that is going to hinder germination. Now, post-emergent that's something that we're trying to actually kill an existing weed, okay? So a lot of times when a lawn care company sprays your yard or is doing something, a lot of times they may be doing a combination of those two things. Now, let's think about this. Pre-emergent. Let me show you an example of a pre-emergent. We'll talk a little bit about that. All right, one pre-emergent that I use that you might find in different forms is the one here next to me. It's called Dimension. Now, you can get it in a granular form, in a powder, in a liquid, different forms that it's going to come in. Dimension actually is going to be somewhat of a pre and post emergent. So like, for instance, if I'm trying to prevent crabgrass, well, if I put this down before the crabgrass germinates, then in theory, you should never see the crabgrass in your lawn. Well, let's say that the crabgrass is already germinated and I put down Dimension. Well, if it's still in a very baby stage, the hope is this Dimension actually has some post-emergent activity on the crabgrass and can actually knock out that baby crabgrass. Now, compare that with another pre-emergent I use a lot of prodiamine, and in that sense it's going to prevent the crabgrass if you get it down before the crabgrass germinates. But if the crabgrass is already germinates, it's not going to do anything to kill the crabgrass. So you would need to go over to a post-emergent for that particular weed. Okay, so something like Solitaire or a product like that. So it's kind of like this idea. You got to understand, a pre-emergent, by definition, you need to have it down before the weed germinates or it's really not doing any good. A lot of times, this is the problem I have. The big box stores start running advertisements in the spring of all these weed control products, and it might be a pre-emergent, but you know what? Sometimes they don't run the ads on TV and encourage the homeowners to go buy it until it's too late. The weeds have already germinated. What happens? You get a lot of frustrated homeowners. I bought this weed control product. Now look, it's summertime and my lawn's full of weeds, and they want to know, what did they do wrong? Well, a lot of times, and I'll give you an example, the same guy I was talking to today, his yard was absolutely full of Poa annua. Well, you call it annual bluegrass, or just short call it Poa. Well, I said, well, tell me what you did. He's been doing the line sale. He said he put out his pre-emergent in November. I said, you know what, that's probably a little bit too late for have your pre-emergent out. I said, next year, why don't you try doing it in September, and I think you'll have better results on that POA control. Because again, in my area, that POA is probably going to be germinating sometime around September, depending on the weather. So you've got to get that pre-emergent out before that happens. Now, let's say you miss it and you end up with a bunch of POA or some other weed in your yard. That's when you switch over and you start using a post-emergent. So we want to go to post-emergent control, and there is an arsenal of different products you can use for post-emergent control of weeds. But the problem is, and this is what I see with homeowners sometimes, and just some people, they just go grab one, it says this kills weeds, and they go spray it on their lawn. They're like, okay, I want all my weeds dead. And it doesn't happen. Well, you need to understand that not all weed control products will kill all weeds. Very much the opposite sometimes, that one weed control product will have a great effect on one weed and seemingly do nothing to another type of weed. So that's where it becomes important to learn how to identify the weeds. And also another very critical aspect is identifying your grass type. Where this same gentleman I was talking to today had damaged his centipede lawn, it may be likely that he sprayed something on his grass to kill the weeds that in fact was not labeled for centipede grass. So maybe he killed the weeds, but he did a lot of damage to his lawn. So there's a number of factors involved in knowing how to kill the weeds without actually killing the lawn. It's understanding pre-emergent and the timing of the application. It's understanding the weeds that you are seeing in your lawn and not just going out there and just pounding your lawn with herbicides if there's no reason to. Understand the specific weeds you're targeting and find a specific weed control product to deal with those weeds. And I'll tell you another important thing, and this is something I've been seeing more and more, is not to spray your grass if you can help it during vulnerable times, like for instance here in the South, when our warm season grasses when they're transitioning out of dormancy and they're going from being, you know, brown dormant grass to turning green, and your lawn may be kind of 50-50 brown and green. Well, that's a very vulnerable time to go blanket spray your lawn. Now, there may be some products that you can do that with, but there may be some other products that by doing that you're going to actually set back your grass and keep it from turning green as quickly as it would have if you would not have sprayed that lawn. So it may be a situation where you think, you know what, if there's not many weeds in the lawn, perhaps I can just spot treat the weeds instead of spraying the entire lawn to keep from setting it back. Or perhaps you can do it a little bit earlier before the grass starts turning green, or wait a little bit longer once the grass has already turned green, and that not during that transition period when it's a little more vulnerable. Let me show you a few products that you can use for weed control. Now, of course, it's very important to read the label to understand which grass type you can use these products on, but I want to run quickly through a few of these products and talk to you about some of the weeds that I use these products on. So, all right, so we'll start over here on the left side. You got MSM Turf that has metsulfuron in it. It's a product that I use on different grass types in the summer and the winter. I use it for wild onions in the winter. In the summertime, maybe blanket spraying a lawn to try to knock out spurge and things like that. You got Tribute Total. This is an expensive product that you're not going to want to blanket your whole yard with unless you just got a lot of money. But basically, I use it for grassy weeds. It's one of the few options out there that will give you some Dallas grass control. But like I said, as a general rule of thumb, I'm going to this Tribute Total for grassy weeds. I'm not going to use it on a lot of broadleafs. Not that it won't control them, but there are a lot cheaper options that will also control broadleafs. This is Pro Sedge. If you're having problems in the summertime, you got a lot of nut sedge out there. You got purple nut sedge, yellow nut sedge. Pro Sedge is one of the products that I'm using. I want to show you guys in another video later another product that I'm using for sedge control. Katana is a product that I use sometimes if I need to get some fescue or ryegrass out of a Bermuda lawn, like here in the South. Sometimes we get, you know, some sort of annual ryegrass popping up in the spring, and I want that gone out of a Bermuda or a zoysia lawn. Then I could use Katana, or, you know, Tribute Total would work as well. Tribute Total, you know, again, you got to read the label, but it's not, you wouldn't want to use that on a centipede or St. Augustine lawn. You're going to cause some damage. Blindside is a product that I'm using a lot of. It has the metsulfuron in it, just like MSM Turf, but also has sulfitrazone in it as well. It works quick. I use Blindside on yellow nut sedge. I use it on Virginia buttonweed, broadleafs. It's one that I kind of keep in the tank a lot during the summer for spot treating weeds. It works on chamber bitter, a number of weeds that I deal with in the summertime. Celsius, another product that you could use to keep in the tank that will knock out a lot of weeds that I see. Kalinga is one that I see a lot of times in the summer that Celsius will do a pretty good job on. I like blindside preferably for Kalinga, but you know, if you needed a product, Celsius actually will have some, you know, discoloration of Dallas grass, and you want to check the label for that. But you know, for centipede lawns, some of these other products you gotta are not labeled for, but Change Up is one that seems to work well on a lot of the weeds that you'll find in centipede, like Lespedeza, chamber bitter, yellow wood sorrel, clover, things like that. Change Up is a great product for it, plus I like the logo with the baseball. All right, these are all post-emergent herbicides. Like I said, you can use these mixed up in a backpack sprayer, 2-gallon sprayer. Most of these are ones that I'm using for spot treating. I might just use a big, have a jug of a 3-way product or something that's less expensive to use that I might mix up in a big spray tank and spray the entire lawn. These are more products, you know, like I said, if a homeowner had a yard and just needed something to walk around spot treating weeds, if you had one of these products that was labeled for your types of grass, and then you can have some success keeping weeds out of your lawn without actually killing the grass. All right, obviously, again, I can't emphasize enough reading the label, understanding what you're doing, understanding how to mix the product at the appropriate rate. A lot of times, the way I've been taught, if it says on there on a particular product label, if it says like per 1,000 square feet for spot treating, okay, what I do is I mix that in 1.5 gallons of water. So if I have a 2-gallon jug, I put 1.5 gallons of water in it, and whatever the rate is per 1,000 square feet. A lot of times people will use it for a gallon of water, but I was trained to use it in 1.5 gallons, a little bit safer, a little bit more watered down, and less likely to burn the grass. So I would do that, particularly if you're a homeowner. Sometimes the likelihood is that they tend to spray too much and not enough. So if you know that you're like to spray the weed too long and actually trying to drown it as opposed to let the herbicide kill it, then you definitely want to go heavier on the water. So anyway, I hope this video is helpful. If you got questions, you can ask them in the comments section. I can't always get to all of them, but I do try to respond to some of them, and look forward to hearing from you guys. If you hadn't done so, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. There's some other helpful videos out there, and I hope to continue to make many more, and look forward to hearing from you guys. You can check out these other suggested videos. Thanks a lot.